Okay. Monday the 7th. Okay, 12 weeks to peak video for today. I was flipping through this, exactly what to say, by our friend Phil Jones. But I have heard this before and I use it all the time. Okay, it's what happens next. That's the concept. What happens next? Now you got to tell your prospective client or customer what's going to happen next when they buy. And actually, even if they don't buy, it's not really a bad thing to say, right? This is what's going to happen. What you're doing is removing uncertainty. Now, as we've talked about in selling, a lot of it is the salesperson creating an idea in their head and then duplicating that in the mind of the prospect, and the success or failure in which you do that determines whether you make the sale or not, right? And there's factors to it, right? It has to be exciting and interesting and solve a problem, hopefully, for the prospect, or else they're not going to do it. They'll just go, that's interesting. But if it's not relevant to them, then they're not going to do anything about it, right? But to a greater degree, as you're able to duplicate that idea over there in their mind and have them go, oh, and challenge your sale, the startling realization, the more likely you are to make that sale. But there is an uncertainty at the end of that process, right? That the sale is over. Now what? What have I gotten myself into? And the more you can reassure them, and again, this doesn't take a lot of emotional energy or time or anything like that, but just let them know what's going to happen next. Now, you may say, well, Jason, isn't it obvious? No. Okay. You know everything about the product or service, or you know more than they do anyway. And so what you got up here is a lot more massive ideas and energy and stuff about knowledge about what's going to go on than they have, right? They got nothing. They got a cubby hole that's empty, right? A black hole up there. It's nothing. You got to fill that with a couple of ideas, at least one, right? Like, even if people go and buy a consulting thing from me, right? Like a chunk of time to talk to me, right? I tell them, this is what's going to happen next. I'm going to send you a calendar link and you're going to pick a time to talk with me, and it'll give you a Zoom link and we'll be off to the races, right? It's that simple. But it's not just, hey, Jason, I paid you $4,100, whatever it is, and blank. I don't know what's going to happen next, right? That is not a situation I want anybody to be in. Number two, if we listen to the Josh Nelsons of the world, right? Seven-figure agency alliance, right? Guy talks about, just wrote a book about client retention. Why is client retention so difficult in the agency world? Because communication sucks between buyer and seller. The buyer sits there going, what results am I getting? The seller goes off and does some stuff. But again, this is just like from the Operational Excellence Society, right? If nobody knows it happened, if there is no documentation, if it wasn't shared, if the results, if what happened isn't in a recorded in some location for people to go to and see that they know exists, it didn't happen. It may as well not have happened. So what do you think happens in the sales process when you get to the end? And you're like, yeah, give me the money for the thing. Okay. And then nothing, right? That sounds like robbery. Give me your dough. Right. So we got to fill that cubby hole, that black hole, in with something, at least one next step. Okay, at least one. What happens next is, right? You're going to receive a welcome email from so-and-so, and it's going to have these things in it. And then your next step after that is to pick another time to talk with me to begin the client consultation part of things. Doesn't that sound cool? Right? Very simple. It doesn't take a long time, but people skip this step or don't know that they need it. And then the prospect goes away and goes, yeah, I kind of like the idea, but I don't know about committing to the money because I don't know what's going to happen next. And they're like, maybe they talked about it. Maybe the salesperson, I don't really remember. Then they're embarrassed or potentially embarrassed, and so they don't ask the question. Right? Now you got a problem as a salesperson, because if they want to ask a question but don't want to do it because they'd feel embarrassed, you're never going to find out about it. They're just going to ghost you. And you might think, well, Jason, how often does that happen? Look, especially with British clients, I see this all the time. I see people joining group coaching programs and they quit after a while. And it's not because of any real fault of the program, but because the culture in that group is sort of a know-it-all group, and the leaders know it all, and the clients, the new clients, don't want to stick up their hand and ask a question because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to have the whole group turn on them and say, oh, geez, you should have known about that. Boy, you suck. And I've seen it. I've seen some group coaching creators and managers make good use of that by talking about it and saying, look, we have clients who came out of groups like that where they were embarrassed to speak up. And isn't that disgusting, et cetera, right? There's issues on both sides there that I'm not going to get into, but this is what's happening. Okay. People are embarrassed to speak up and ask questions. And so they're certainly not going to ask you, well, what happens next? And that's also a big buying question too, right? So expecting them to commit to a question like that in most conversations is unrealistic. Okay. So if you bring it up, you're answering that question and you're giving them relief. You're solving a problem for them, a significant emotional problem that you probably weren't giving a lot of weight to. And as you heard me in my examples, it doesn't take very long. It doesn't take very much. Just a sentence or two. Here's what's going to happen next. When you buy, this is what's going to happen next. You're going to receive the welcome email, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Not difficult. Okay. So that's my concept from today. If you want more verbiage about it, get that Exactly What to Say book that I put back down on my rolling cart shelf there. So it's easy to get at, but I don't want to lean over right now and read about it, but just start using it. Okay. Think in terms of client retention, right? Already, you haven't even got them on board yet. Start thinking about terms of client retention so that they stick around, so that it's embedded in them from the very start. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.